This notebook here contains the 3 most important strategies that I use every day as a full-time sports bettor. And over the next 2 minutes, I will reveal those strategies to you so that you can become a better sports bettor. Strategies that I have learned from direct experience and from other sharp bettors that have been in this game for decades, including but not limited to my personal favorite strategy that I call the Vegas Knows numbers hack, which I use to consistently gain a strong edge on most of my bets. Let me put it this way. Profitable sports betting is a lot like putting together the pieces of a puzzle, and combining these 3 strategies will help you complete that puzzle. But before we get right to that, why should you listen to me? Well, my name is David, and I have spent over 10,000 hours for the past 3 years betting on sports full-time like I mentioned before, and I've wagered almost $5 million in that time span in betting volume while winning overall with a roughly 6 to 7% ROI on my wagers. And no, I don't have a Lambo, a Rolex, or a mansion to flex to you. In fact, it wasn't until late January of 2022 when I was laid off from my job at the time that I was compelled to bet on sports as a way to make money. At the time, I was already a slightly profitable casual bettor, but now that I was no longer working for someone else, I decided to take a chance on myself. After all, life is a game of endless possibilities, and I felt like I had nothing to lose at the time. Fast forward to now, and I'm still doing this 3 years later, with many insights to share with you, because it pains me to see 99% of bettors lose to the books. And I know what that feels like because I was once there myself. So with that said, let's begin with my first strategy, which is handicapping games with power ratings, qualitative factors, and betting systems. In the simplest terms, a power rating is a number that strives to objectively rate the quality of a team. They rely on raw statistics instead of personal bias, public perception, or emotion. When you assign or calculate power ratings for 2 teams that are playing each other, you can get a sense for who will win the game and by the margin of how much. In most cases, the difference between 2 power ratings forms a point spread. And this point spread serves as a baseline for creating your own betting lines on games without any further adjustments. Now, you want to compare this baseline spread to the one offered by the books. The bigger the gap or the difference, the bigger the edge. To put it another way, you want to be able to say that number is way too high or that number is way too low. Let me give you a quick example of what this may look like for an NFL matchup between the 49ers and the Chiefs. Let's say you have the Chiefs power rated at 7 and the 49ers at 4. Based on these power ratings, the Chiefs are 3-point favorites and the 49ers are the 3-point underdogs. So let's say books offer the Chiefs as 3-point underdogs against the 49ers. You would now see a 6-point edge on the Chiefs and you would bet on the Chiefs spread. And by the way, there are a wide range of power ratings available out there. I will provide links for some sources that you can access power ratings in my free PDF down below by joining my Telegram channel in the video description. Now, you can't rely on power ratings alone, obviously. You need to understand that power ratings rely only on the raw numbers. They don't account for qualitative or tangible factors that can have a significant impact on the outcomes of a game. Things like weather, injuries, revenge, motivation, coaching, home field advantage, and so on. If you rely too heavily on power ratings, you can be drawn into making bets that appear on the surface to have value based on your numbers alone, but which really don't have any value because of those other factors. With that said, handicapping is an 80-20 process. 80% of it is raw numbers from power ratings, while the other 20% is from the tangible or qualitative factors. These factors provide you the opportunity to also adjust the baseline betting lines you create from your power ratings. And there are 2 ways, actually, you can apply them to your handicapping process. Number 1, by assigning point values for those qualitative factors, or number 2, by linking those factors to betting systems. In the NFL, for example, home field advantage is usually worth around 2 points. And going back to the 49ers Chiefs example, if the 49ers are at home in this game, then your adjusted spread should have the 49ers as 1-point underdogs and the Chiefs as a 1-point favorite. Now, what is a betting system? A betting system basically links qualitative factors that apply to the particular outcome or game that you are handicapping. And they are tracked and backed by long-term sports betting data. These factors need to be checked off in order to fit the system it falls into. Factors are things like what I mentioned before, but also other things, of course, such as days of rest, travel, if a team is a favorite or an underdog, if a team is coming off a win or a loss, if it's a conference or division game, and many more. Some systems are fairly complex, containing maybe 1 to 3 factors, while some systems are more complex, containing 4 to 6 factors. When all factors can be checked off for a particular system, you have a stronger signal supporting a particular play that you are handicapping. One example of a basic system for college football with only 2 factors is when the wind percentage is 14 miles per hour or higher and the temperature is 60 degrees or less, the total for that game will go under roughly 60% of the time. And one example of a complex system for college football is when the game is a conference game, the underdog is playing against a top 25 ranked team, the point spread is between +10 and +23, and the game is being played at a neutral site, the underdog will cover the point spread over 80% of the time. The more betting systems you have to back a particular play, the better. So now you have the foundation for making your own lines and applying qualitative and tangible factors in betting systems to adjust your lines and filter down on your plays. Let's now dive into the second strategy, which is simply reading the sports betting markets. You see, sports betting is not just about knowing numbers or ball. It's also a market like the stock market or even a supermarket where you pay certain prices for food. With sports betting, reading the betting market is a lot like being a detective, piecing together evidence to solve a crime, or a doctor diagnosing symptoms for an illness that a patient may have. Now, there are actually 2 tools for reading the betting market. Number 1, looking at betting splits, and 2, tracking line movement for predictive patterns and indicators. And these tools provide you with clues on what sides to bet on or avoid betting on altogether. But before we go deeper into that, let's cover the psychology of betting lines from a market standpoint. For context, the NFL and every other sport and league out there are all considered individual markets with their own unique traits and dynamics. And you want to cultivate the mindset that any side is bettable at the right price and number. Now, betting lines are driven just as much by numbers as they are by betting psychology and the perception from the other bettors in each market. So you want to look at teams as if they were a stock. When you look to bet on the team when the public sentiment is low on that team and bet against that team when public sentiment is high. The better perceived the stock, the higher the perceived value, of course, and corresponding price you will have to pay will be much higher to buy that stock. A positively perceived team is likely going to be overvalued in the betting market. And as a result, they are likely priced at an inflated number if you want to bet on that side. On the flip side, of course, a negatively perceived team is often undervalued in the sports betting market, and you are likely to get better numbers and value betting on those sides. This concept also holds true for betting totals, by the way. With most bettors betting the over on totals, there is typically more inherent betting value betting on unders, as bookmakers anticipate the average bettor betting the over by shading totals to higher numbers than they should be set at. And finally, sportsbooks don't always actually want balanced action on both sides of a betting line. They're in the business of raking in profits, not just from parlays, of course, and they will, in certain situations, welcome lopsided betting action by being comfortable taking a stand or heavy educated position on one side, especially when they have strong information in favor of that one side. One possible indicator for that coming from sharp bettors betting into that side. So in those situations, books will book betting action to need the same side as our sharp bettors do. Now moving along, let's now discuss the first important tool for reading the betting markets, and that is breaking down betting splits, which are basically the distribution of bets placed on each side of a wager, represented by the percentage of bet tickets or betting dollars on each side. The sides that have a higher percentage of money but a lower percentage of betting tickets are usually the sharp sides. On the flip side, of course, sides with a lower percentage of money but a higher percentage of betting tickets are usually indicators for public sides. There are tools and sources that provide betting splits, of course, which I will link in the document that you can access by joining my free Telegram channel, linked down below in the description. Now, VSiN and Sports Insights are commonly used paid tools for viewing betting splits, but I also use a tool called Zcode to look at them. Now, when you're looking at betting splits, pay attention to the sides that have a lopsided distribution of betting action based on the money percentage or bet percentage or both. Those are the sides that have the highest liability for the books that they win. And when considering a wager, I either 1, avoid betting that overbooked side altogether, or number 2, bet the side that benefits the books if I already see a bettable edge on that side. Keyword, of course. Basically, I either stay on the sidelines or bet with the side the books benefit from, so that when I win, they win. Some call this fading the public, of course, but I don't go off of that alone. It's a place to last in the line of all the strategies I'm laying out for you in this video. And of course, public sides do win, contrary to the belief that Vegas always wins. With that said though, it's important to note that fading the public works more for games with a high concentration of betting volume on a particular side or total. One example of this, of course, will be primetime games like Monday Night Football and the NFL, where the volume of action is very high and concentrated. Lower profile games, on the other hand, have less betting action and less eyeballs and are less of a liability for the books. Even if they take in lopsided action on those games, a good rule of thumb to follow is that it still pays to stay away from betting on overbooked sides, regardless of how concentrated the betting volume is. Moving along, let's now cover the second aspect of reading the betting markets: tracking line movement for predictive patterns and indicators. One of my betting mentors once told me that he tracks every betting line he sees, every single one of them, because their movement and behavior often serve as subtle tells for how an event is likely to play out. It didn't really register with me at first though, of course, but once I started tracking betting lines for every team and every game of the sports I bet on, I started to take mental notes of predictive patterns I picked up from just looking at them every single day. And these patterns help me with choosing many of my bets simply by recognizing them when they do come up. The downside of doing this though is that there are no shortcuts. The only way to get good with identifying patterns when betting based on reading the betting lines day in and day out is to just do this every day. To point you in the right direction though, ask yourself, what does the line typically look like when a team wins or loses? Or what does the line typically look like when a total goes over or under? Think in terms of a range of numbers, by the way, when doing this, not one specific number. Now, even though most of these line movements and patterns are subtle, there are a couple universally applicable patterns that I can point out for you. One of them is that when the odds change on the line for a particular outcome, it can be as simple as a -110 line dropping to -105 or shifting to -115, or 2, a line moving up or down half a point or more on a total or spread. Both of these subtle changes in the line are worth noting when tracking line movement and behavior. Now let me give you an example of a wager I made in the NFL based on a pattern I noticed with totals. This wager was for a matchup between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. For context, of course, the two teams previously played each other earlier in the season. And in that first matchup, the first half soared way over the first half total. Now, I didn't have a wager on this game, but like I said before, I pay attention to every single betting line for every game and every team, even if I don't bet on it. Now, I noted in the first game that the second half total was set at 24, and the under, which likely would have won, actually lost because the game went into overtime. Now, in the second matchup, the first half also ended up soaring over the first half total. And at halftime, I looked for the second half line on the total, and guess what? Once again, the total was set at 24. This time I bet the under, and that resulted in a win. So first half over, second half under, with the same number on the second half total as the previous game between those two teams. And as they say, history doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes. Oh, and by the way, to track betting lines, I recommend using a live odds screen to see all of the current betting lines and their history in one place. Now, I use a tool personally called Odds Logic when I'm looking at lines from my computer, and on my phone, I use an app called Live Scores and Odds, and anyone can use that, it's free. So websites like Maddox Sports and Wager Talk also offer free live odds screens you can use from your computer, and you can access all these links in the document that I have linked through my Telegram channel, which you can join down below. Now, moving back to our discussion of tracking betting lines, keep in mind that lines move for any number of reasons. Typically, a line may move up or down throughout the day based on an influx of money bet on a particular side. For example, if a 3-point underdog is getting most of the betting action, the number may move down to 2.5 or 2 points, or actually the underdog may even flip to being the favorite at one point. Sometimes this movement is gradual, but when the line changes rapidly or heavily due to sharp action, this is what we call steam. This is the line movement that you want to pay attention to and take note of, because this is usually an indicator that sharp bettors are betting on this side. And one other important distinction to take note of when tracking line movement is that when you see that the line moves away from the side receiving the majority of the betting action in dollars, this is an indicator that books are comfortable taking a position on the side that is getting less betting action. This type of line movement is otherwise known as reverse line movement. And you'll notice too that steam, reverse line movement, they all typically align with sharp betting action and the betting split data. Now, let's tie everything back together with an example from the NFL between the Jets and Texans, where the Jets won 21-13. This game is a classic example of why it pays to learn how to read the betting markets. In that game, the Jets opened as 1.5-point underdogs, actually. However, that opening line flipped, with the Jets actually closing as 2.5-point favorites before kickoff, despite more betting action coming in on the Texans. Psychologically, it felt safe to bet the Texans and scary to bet the Jets, since obviously public perception for the Jets was at an all-time low. Considering their recent performances, of course, the line also steamed in favor of the Jets, and the reverse line movement was a strong signal that the Jets were likely the sharp side. And from a betting split perspective, the Texans were a heavy liability for the books on this game, and they were willing to take a heavy position in favor of the Jets. This position was also indicated by the reverse line movement in that game. The Texans had a more attractive betting line. Now overall, the takeaway from this is that the betting market serves as a useful tool when considering sides to bet on or staying away from altogether, as it pertains to what the books need or what other sharp bettors are betting on. So now we've gone through how to handicap games and how to read the betting market. Now we get to my third and favorite strategy, the Vegas Knows numbers hack. With this strategy, it's all about getting the best number and beating the closing line for each wager you bet, while at the same time assuming that the line is already efficient in the market and closely resembles the probability of an event. There are 3 approaches you can use for executing on this. Number 1, by betting early when lines first open before the rest of the market does. Number 2, by betting blind market edges. Or number 3, and my favorite, by betting second half or in-game lines, otherwise known as live betting. The first approach ties back into the handicapping process. If you go this route, and if your profile is a sharp bettor, you'll likely move the betting line in your favor, if you bet early, of course. For example, if you like a 3-point favorite you would want that line to steam to 3.5 points or higher after you bet it. That would indicate that the market is moving in your favor. I usually deploy this approach if I see a pre-game edge that I already like, and it's something that I anticipate other sharp bettors in the market agreeing with me on. Getting a bet down early will typically result in beating the closing line if that's the case, especially in sports like college basketball, where lines move a lot more than they do in other sports like the NFL. And it's important to get the best number because each half point or full point matters. Now, moving on to the second approach, the key here is to look for off numbers between different sports books in the market. For example, let's say you like an underdog at a +3 point spread, and that line moves to +2.5 or +2 at other sharp books. You would like to look for that +3 at the book still offering that line before it's corrected to +2.5 or +2. It's as simple as that, of course, but you have to monitor lines throughout the day and use a live odds screen to find these opportunities. And by the way, going back to what I covered with you on tracking lines and line movement, sharp sportsbooks are usually the first to move lines, while the majority of other books copy and move lines on air in reaction to when sharp books move their lines. Now, the downside to the second approach is that it's time-consuming and tedious, while the downside to the first approach is that you have to be good at handicapping and you don't necessarily get the benefit of seeing how a market develops before game time. That is why I prefer using the third approach as my main approach for betting at the best numbers and the lines. Think of this approach like anticipating and timing the peaks and valleys of buying and selling a stock. You want to buy low at the bottom and you want to buy high at the top. For example, if two teams come out scoring in the first half at a torrid pace, you can typically expect the live total to go up and for the scoring pace to decrease as the second half goes on. It's just like it did in the Falcons-Buccaneers game that I pointed out earlier to you, which beat the closing line on the pregame, which did lose actually, but won for the live second half bet as the scoring regressed closer to the expected total for the full game in the second half. Keep in mind that peaks and valleys still apply when betting pregame lines, especially if you believe that the pregame line is the best available line that you will be able to get at any point in the game. Now, betting second half in live offers you the ability to compare those lines with the first half and full game lines. And of course, you have the opportunity to get a better number, whether that's on a total or a side, sometimes a money line too, of course, but did not like enough to bet at that pregame number. Obviously though, you can't just blindly bet a better number just because it's there. Live lines and second half lines do get shaded too, especially in situations where a heavy favorite is down at halftime, where books typically inflate the second half lines on that heavy favorite for them to come back. In situations like this, actually, the value would be actually betting on the underdog on the second half spread. But I don't actually recommend betting that either, because you're going to be getting a far worse number than you would be getting on the pregame line. At that point, it's just pass on it altogether. With that said, you have to come in with a game plan when betting second half and live betting lines. For every game I'm considering, I have preset conditions in mind that have to be checked off in order for me to consider a wager. And if all that lines up, actually, I will consider a second half or live wager, if it's at the right number and situation, of course. And for context, one of the primary preset conditions that I usually have is that the market supports that side pregame. So, for example, if a particular NFL game is expected to finish at 48 points, that's where the total is set, and there are 41 points scored in the first half, I will look to bet the second half under, assuming the second half line offered is priced at the number that I want, and 2, if the market supports the under, where in that case, the over would be overbooked and be a liability pregame. FYI, I'm referring to the second half under that I told you about earlier with the Falcons and the Buccaneers. Now, this wager checked off the market conditions that I was looking for, which pattern I usually look for, which is the first half going over and the second half going under. And also it checked off the live second half betting line, by giving me a far superior number than the pregame line. So basically, with the Vegas knows numbers hack, you're basically piggybacking off the extensive data that sportsbooks use to set their lines, and also the sharp bettors that shape those betting lines, while also piggybacking off regression to the mean when betting second half lines or in-game lines to add an extra buffer on your wagers. So there you have it. These are the 3 strategies that the sharpest bettors in the world apply in some shape or form to win. And to quickly recap them for you, number 1, handicapping games with power ratings to make your own betting lines, and applying systems and qualitative factors to adjust your lines and filter down your plays. And number 2, reading the betting markets by tracking betting lines, identifying predictive patterns, and looking at the betting split data. And number 3, getting the best number and beating the closing line by applying the Vegas knows numbers hack. From my experience, these strategies work in tandem and make for a lethal combination. And if you make the effort to implement and apply everything I have covered with you in this video today, you can become a better sports bettor. And if you would like to learn how you can implement these 3 strategies step by step, or get access to my personal betting plays that I bet every single day, then make sure to click the Telegram link down below in the video description. It will take you to my Telegram channel where you can gain access to the free document containing all the links to the tools that I use every day as a full-time sports bettor. I will also be dropping more insights there as well. And you can message me directly with any questions you have once you join. And finally, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more sports betting insights, tutorials, and breakdowns that will help you become a better and more profitable sports bettor. Best of luck with your wagers. Until next time, peace.